How's it going, everyone? Today we got a story of a spoiled kid who does very standard spoiled kid behavior, believes that, his parents' money is basically his, and tries to flex on this girl to impress her. And let me just, a little spoiler, it doesn't work. But yeah, let's just jump into the story before I lose you guys. And we're going to call the subscriber Cameron. So anyways, right, there was this new girl at Cameron's school who we're going to call Maya. This was like, I don't know, 8th grade or something like that. And, basically, is the start of the year. They didn't really get a lot of new kids, as it was mostly just kids in the neighborhood district type thing. And so it was kind of a rare occasion for there to be like a new person in the school. And, all the guys were like, oh my God, like it's a new girl. You know how that goes. Anyways, though, so, the guys were kind of talking with each other, and there's this kid called the spoiled kid. We're going to call him the spoiled kid. If I give him a name, I'm going to forget the name, and then you guys are like, oh, why are you calling Jerry Tim? It's because I can't remember anything. My short-term memory is not that much better than a goldfish. So we're going with one name, okay? So anyways, right, the guys were talking at the dinner table, the lunch table. They were kind of chatting, and the spoiled kid's like, yo, new girl, beautiful, man. I'm going to try. And, the other guys being supportive because, you're supportive of the boys, even though this guy was kind of like on the edge of their friendship. What I mean by that is they didn't necessarily not like him, but they also weren't necessarily friends, just because he's had a lot of moments where you're like, is this kid a jerk or not? I can't really tell. But they were like friendly with him. So they were like, yeah, bro, like we got you. And he's like, hey, can you guys kind of like test are any of you guys kind of friendly with her? Like, or try to be, can you like test the waters? I want to try something, but just let me know. And this is a very valid way to go about it. You don't want to go in blind sometimes, even though sometimes it is better just to try. And, so anyways, Cameron and some of the other guys were like, yeah, we'll see what we can do about it. Sure enough, one of the other guys at the table, we'll just call him Ben, because of course we're going to call him Ben. Ben was there, and, he was like, yeah, actually, I'm, like, friends with some of her friends, or the people that she's just becoming friends with. I'll definitely put in a good word. I'll see what's up, and I'll get back to you. So anyways, right, Ben goes and he, like, talks to the girls that are friends with with Maya. That's the name. If I didn't say it already, that's the name that we're going to give the new girl, Maya's new friends. And Ben goes and is like, hey, like, I have this friend, spoiled kid. This spoiled kid wasn't a bad-looking kid, and he seemed well enough put together, but obviously there were some deep-rooted insecurities that he was about to expose in the worst possible way. But he was like, yeah, spoiled kid's kind of interested. Like, can you talk to Maya, see if there's, like, any kind of, like, reciprocality involved? Like, any bit at all? And she's like, yeah. Or they're like, yeah, 100%, we'll go back to you. So sure enough, they talk to Maya, and, she's open to it. It's not like she's falling head over heels for this kid, but she's open to it. So Ben comes back to the lunch table a couple days later, and he shares the good news.
Connor, I told you to stop dating my mom. It's weird.
Anyways, so Ben gets back to the table. He shares the good news. And, all the kids are, like, kind of, like, excited, dapping up the spoiled kid. Even though they didn't, like him that much, he was still, like, they were all, like, kind of cool with him. And he was, like, trying to make an effort to be friends with him. So they're like, yeah, he's a little something at sometimes. Like, maybe arrogance the right word. Maybe it's not. I don't know. They were like, yeah, whatever. They were excited for him. He was sitting with them. So it was, it was a cool atmosphere. Things were good. So the spoiled kid was pretty excited about that. And he was, like, asking for some advice. They're like, okay, dude, just talk to her, which, shocker, I mean, I haven't learned that apparently yet. They don't just fall in love with you, man? You gotta talk to them? Yeah, but anyways, right. He's like, okay, fine, I'll go talk to her. We'll see how this goes. The problem is, though, the spoiled kid was not super confident. And because of that, his insecurities started to show a little bit. And the spoiled kid's insecurities manifested in him kind of being a jerk, a huge, massive jerk face. I don't know how else to put it, but unfortunately for him, that's kind of how it happened. So Ben was kind of keeping tabs on how it was going because he was friends with Maya's friends. And Maya's friends at first were like, oh, it's good. Maya and him just talked recently. She says he's cute or whatever. Like, however girls talk. I don't know. But anyways, right. At a certain point, though, when Ben went to go talk to them, they were like, oh, well, about that, actually. It's going downhill a little bit. And Ben was like, oh, what do you mean it's going downhill a little bit? Like, what happened? And they were like, yeah, the spoiled kid, things were going pretty good. But apparently he was saying some stuff to Maya that was like kind of like turning her off like in a pretty big way. And Ben was like, oh, what did he say? And they were like, well, he started to talk about like, what his dad did for a living, how he doesn't really need to worry about school because he can do whatever he wants, how like, a life with him is like a life of security. And then like the main reason of that is because like he's chilling, how like he's got this really cool beach house, which I think the spoiled kid's mind was trying to like be like, I'm a good partner. You don't have to worry about things if you're with me. But then the way he was phrasing it was pretty terrible. Like, oh, I don't have to try. Like, I'll be fine forever. Like, even if that's true, which is true for like 0.0006% of the population, like, just don't put it like that. Like, they'll eventually figure that out. But just don't say that and don't have that attitude. Like, that kind of mindset, even if you got it like that, if you're not trying, if you're not ambitious, if you're not going after it, if you're not that type of person, like, it's going to be a big turnoff. So, Ben kind of like pulled the spoiled kid aside kind of like separately and kind of like was like, hey, like you might want to chill with X, Y, and Z. And the spoiled kid was like, okay, sure. And unfortunately, though, the next time Ben went to go talk to Maya's friends, they were all like, yeah, man, I'm sorry. I don't think Maya's interested anymore. And Ben was like, but I told like the spoiled kid like to chill with that. And they're like, well, he must have just like not listened to you and did the opposite because she said it got worse. Just imagine what I was saying, like that he was saying before, but now it's like twice as blatant, twice as like arrogant, twice as annoying. It was just ramping up, and Maya realized that this was just not for her. And unfortunately, or I guess I don't know, unfortunately to the spoiled kid's perspective, we'll say that, Ben, confronted him, was basically like, hey, I'm sorry. I got word that I don't think this is going to work out anymore. Spoiled kid was not very happy, but I mean, I get it. Like, I mean, you kind of played yourself here, but yeah, it's sad, it's tough, but it is life, and you'll move on. So about like a month goes by, a long time goes by is what I'm trying to like emphasize here, that a lot of time happens. And, during that time, the spoiled kid is no longer pursuing, but, still, I don't know. He's just no longer pursuing actively. And, Cameron has had some good conversations with Maya and starts to think to himself, well, it's not like this is, it's not like, one, it's not like I'm close with the spoiled kid. Two, it's not like this is his ex-girlfriend. Like, he just shot a shot and failed. Like, that's not breaking bro code or anything. Very generally, to you younger viewers out there, there is, especially among I'm not an English major. I put numbers together and try and make computers do stuff. I don't do English, man. For the gentlemen out there, right? There's something called bro code. It kind of depends per unit of gentleman that it is enacted upon. However, very generally, you don't go after one of their sisters, okay? Gentlemen, let's not do that. You also have to give a long time for one of their exes. And for many groups, you just never, ever do anything with an ex. And obviously with a current, like you don't need bro code to know that. Generally, if you stick by those rules, you will be fine. So when, Cameron pulled up the bro code doctrine right next to his trusty Declaration of Independence in his pocket, because those are of equal value and equal written instructional, I don't even know, right? He pulls it out, and he's like, you know what? This doesn't matter. I think I'm going to try and pursue her. And sure enough, word gets around pretty quickly, that Cameron's trying to pursue her. And once again, he also goes to Ben, because Ben is the plug, apparently. And Ben, talks to her friends, and Maya's interested. And the thing is, Cameron isn't a big Douche? I don't know. Is that like, are you guys gonna get mad at me? Is that like a bad word or something? I mean, okay, kids, don't like say that if you're in like kindergarten or something, please. But yeah, that's the best way to describe it. Cameron wasn't like that. So it was starting to go pretty well. And that's when, the spoiled kid started to overhear this, started to hear a little bit about this, started to, listen to what was going on, and wasn't that happy, believe it or not. Yeah, so the spoiled kid overhears this and he gets all big grumpy or whatever. He gets big mad. I don't even know, right? And so one day, Cameron and Maya are just sitting at lunch together because, they've started to talk a lot. They're not officially anything, but anyone, unless Cameron is to fumble horrendously, which I do know some Camerons that would probably fumble horrendously, unless he's to do that, right, then things are probably going to look like they might start becoming something more official. And the spoiled kid knows this. And so while they're sitting at lunch one day, just the two of them at the table, very nice, right? Congrats. Making moves, man. The spoiled kid walks over to their table. And the thing is, right, Cameron wasn't like not cool with the spoiled kid, but he also wasn't necessarily friends. They would occasionally sit at the same lunch table. I don't know if you guys have this at school, but, you kind of like, I used to do this a lot. I would sit at like a lunch table or dinner table, and there would be like mostly guys I know, but also some guys that were just friends with some of the guys I know that would sit there, and I was always friendly with them, but I wouldn't like hit them up and be like, "Hey, what are you doing today?" Right? I would be friendly with them. I'd be cool with them, but I wouldn't necessarily call them like a good friend. They would probably go under the category of like acquaintance or something like that. But anyways, right, the spoiled kid walks up to them, and Cameron looks up and is like, what's up? That's a very, that makes sense. That makes sense of a question, right? Like some just random kid comes up to you that you kind of know and is just looking at the table of you and and kind of in the back of his head, Cameron's remembering like, oh yeah, spoiled kid liked her at the beginning of the year and he kind of dropped the bag or whatever. But Cameron does not expect what is about to come next. Today we're sponsored by Rage. I'm kidding. I don't get sponsors that much. But anyways, subscribe though if you're new. And basically the spoiled kid comes up and he walks up to, Cameron and Maya, and they're sitting there and they kind of look at him and, he looks back or whatever. And he's just like looking. He doesn't look at Cameron, right? He turns directly and looks at Maya. And he's like, so, I see you've made your choice then. They both kind of look at the spoiled kid back like, what's this kid talking about? Because they kind of have, when like something really, when you're completely confused and you start making some like guesses in your head and you have like two to three like guesses, like it could be this, could be that. One of the guesses was that, that he was talking about, how he used to like Maya or whatever and it didn't work through. But they didn't even put that as the number one guess because it was so out of the blue. And he's like, so, you've chosen him. Let me just tell you something about him versus me. And the spoiled kid goes on to have a massive rant / like freak out breakdown type event about how his father is like financially he will be able to sustain generations, and that Maya should have chose him because, the incredible vacations they would have gone on together and the life that they could have lived would have been significantly better than any life that, Cameron could have ever given to her. Cameron is like, hey, chill. You don't know what I'm going to do with my life, bro. Like, come on now. He doesn't say that, but that's what he's thinking. He's not trying to get involved in nonsense like this. And and the spoiled kid is like, ranting about like how she made a terrible choice. They're going on and on and on and on. And that's when, like, in the middle of one of his rants, Maya stops him and is like, she was like, you just clearly explained why I didn't choose you. And like it was just like dead silent for a second. The spoiled kid's like, well, I don't understand. I just explained why you should have chosen me. And Maya's like, no, you just explained to me why I didn't choose you. And the spoiled kid isn't getting it, But Cameron immediately is like, whoa, okay, this is like, because like Cameron heard from Ben that like, oh, well, spoiled kid was kind of being like arrogant or a jerk or whatever, and that's why Maya stopped talking to him. Cameron didn't really understand what that meant, but he really did understand what that meant now. And the spoiled kid's like, no, I don't get it. I don't think you understand. You need me to say it again. And Maya's like, no, I heard you I heard you clear. Like, you just explain, like, think about it for a second. So the spoiled kid very angrily walks off. And, yeah, from that point on, the spoiled kid did not make any more attempts. I think the spoiled kid probably eventually figured out what Maya was trying to say. But, I mean, who knows, man? He was pretty delusional for saying that in the first place. Maya and Cameron, they don't actually end up dating or anything like that. It just didn't follow through. They just remain friends. I think that's what I was told in the Instagram DM. Submit your stories to me on Instagram or Twitter and just DM me. Please also be following me because I like big numbers next to my name. And I'm more likely to take your story if you do because that's just how it is. Anyways, the next story is about, if I had to title this next story, it would be Her Dad Punched Me in the Face. So I think that you'll enjoy this one, so you should probably stick around if you got a second. We're going to call this subscriber Clarence. And anyways, right, Clarence had a school project with a girl in his class. And he didn't know this girl that well, but whatever, he knew her well enough that, it wasn't that awkward or anything. And the thing was, this was a project that was supposed to be done over the weekend and not during school hours. Or not during, like, class hours. I guess you could do it during school or whatever. But it was a big enough project that they needed to do it on the weekend, and Clarence and the girl kind of came to the conclusion that the best idea was to do this thing together at one of their houses. And the girl says, hey, why don't you come over to my house this weekend? Because they all lived in, like, the same neighborhood, literally, like, a walk away, like a 10, 15-minute walk. Clarence was totally fine doing that. So anyways, Clarence, gets his stuff, puts in his bag, and he walks over, and he's kind of, like, texting the girl, like, hey, I'm 5 minutes away. And she's like, cool. And he gets there, he's like, hey, I'm outside, opens the door, and Clarence immediately notices, like, as he's walking up, that there's no cars in the driveway. When he gets there, there's no parents in the house. And he's like, hey, so your parents aren't home. And she's like, yeah, they'll be back eventually, but, yeah, they're just not here right now. And he's like, they know I'm here, right? And she's like, yeah, I guess. I think I mentioned it. They won't care. Turns out they did care, but you'll see that in a second. So anyways, they get down and they're starting to work on this project. They're sitting, just to kind of like paint the picture, they're sitting at the kitchen table, and they just have all this like school supplies and product and whatever out there. Because I think they're making a project. So it's not like a Google Doc where you kind of had to... like a Google Doc where you could have easily done it at home and you didn't have to be there together. It was like a physical project, so they kind of needed to be in the same place. So they were putting something together, and that's when the door opens. And it is this girl's dad. And this girl is like, hey, I don't know, Kate, I'm home or whatever. And then immediately, when his dad makes eye contact with Cameron, who expects that he knows that this is just some guy from school, his face completely turns. He's like, hey, who are you? And at this point, Kate is starting to be he's like, no, Dad, it's not what you think. So it turns out that, Kate's dad has a very, very, very strict no dating, no boyfriend, no boys, you do what you want in college, but under my roof, that's not happening type attitude. And is very, very, very intense with it. As you'll see, very intense with it. And her dad starts pushes right by Kate, sorry, that's a name from a previous story. I get it mixed up sometimes. And she's like, no, Dad, no, you don't understand. That's, he's from school. And he's like, I don't care where this boy is from school. No boys are allowed in my house. And he goes up and he's being all big guy or whatever to Clarence. He's like, so you think you can just mess with my daughter and not get messed up from me? And Clarence is just no, yeah, understand. I'm just here for a school project. Boom, slaps him directly across the face and get out of my house. And Clarence is just shocked that he just got slapped across the face and is being yelled at to leave the house. So he does. He doesn't want the smoke, bro. He doesn't want to deal with this. This is a waste of his time. So he gets up and he kind of angrily leaves. And Kate's like, oh, wait outside, I'll explain this. And her dad's like, you better, if you're on my lawn in the next 60 seconds, I'm coming out there. And he steps out there and he waits. Clarence is like, all right, I'm going to wait out here for a little bit, but then I am going to go if I see this guy walk out because he's crazy. And so Clarence doesn't actually hear what Kate says inside, but Kate tells him after the fact, so I'm going to add this into the story now like he did. Basically, Kate explained to her dad, like, Dad, it's not my boyfriend. I barely know this kid. We have a class assignment. It's due Monday. We need to work on it over the weekend. If you don't believe me, then why are all these school supplies on the table? And her dad, who is calming down because it was a big, like, emotional thing, notices that, why are all this stuff on the table? And this is a guy I've never seen before. And, he seemed to be pretty confused why I was mad. And eventually, Kate's dad realizes, this is just some kid. I just slapped some kid in the face and screamed at him to get out of my house when he was just working on a project with my daughter. I kind of seem like the crazy one here. So Kate opens the door because, Clarence was going to just turn around and start power walking away if Kate's dad came out and opened the door or whatever. Kate opens the door, says, hey, I am so incredibly sorry. He's like, okay. And Kate's like, hey, look, we still got to finish the project. I talked to my dad. He gets it now. He's really embarrassed. Come on in. I promise nothing will happen. Clarence is like, well, you also said that, nothing was going to happen before and that they knew that I was here, but okay, fine. Because Clarence is not super happy right now. I don't think I'd be super happy. His face is still red, from being slapped. He's still shaken up from the whole thing. So it happened in the span of 45 seconds. And he gets in there and, the dad's in the other room, just embarrassed, whatever. So they sit down, they keep working on the project, and they're kind of working on it in almost dead silence, except before they were having a nice conversational chat just to be friendly or whatever. But now Clarence was not helping it. He was not trying in the friendly conversation. Clarence would only speak when necessary, I need you to pass the scissors, or what do you think we should do here? So yeah, it was pretty awkward. But about 45 minutes in, the dad kind of very timidly walks in the room and is like, hey, buddy, I'm sorry about that. I just get a certain way when I think my daughter's dating someone. And Clarence kind of looks at him, is like, okay. He doesn't say you're fine. He just says, okay. And his dad's like, yeah, I'm just going to come in and get some water and I'll leave you two. I'll leave you two at it, right? Clarence is kind of just keeping an eye on him in the corner of his eye. He's like, I'm not letting this guy out of my sight. Because all he knows is he's going to come behind him and strangle him with a plastic bag or who knows, right? And, the dad walks out of the room, obviously very embarrassed by what just happened. And, that was Clarence and Kate finished the thing up. And sure enough,